Welcome everyone to the show, Combustible Elements, real talk for real people. Here we try to put different ideas and perspectives together in a pot, heat it up, and get an explosion of knowledge and understanding. We understand that problems can only be fixed starting from the bottom to the top, building a great foundation for change and improvement. I'm Big Mel, and I'm joined by Ruben, aka the Monarch, and Aaron, the Hitman. Thank you, everyone, for joining us once again for Combustible Elements. I'm Big Mel. I'm joined by Aaron the Hitman and Ruben the Monarch. We're talking today about a topic that a lot of people use. Um, we're going to see if they're using it as a mistake or they're using it in its proper form. We're going to talk about melanated people. We in the United States like to throw melanated people and use that topic as like the whole world. We all minorities, we all stick together. And yes, in the history of the world, there is a discrepancy between your darker minorities and how they were treated and other minorities. Um, However, we're going to see if that topic is true about melanated people being in every group. Um, I'm going to start off now because I had a few minutes to think about this. And when I say a few minutes, I mean a few minutes to think about that within the last few minutes. I came to this realization that a lot of times people like to be in groups. We already know that our society is made up of groups. People like to be in certain groups that they feel akin to. But I think when it comes to the topic of melanated people, I think a lot of times in the United States, a lot of African Americans feel like they displaced because our history, our knowledge of our history is pretty much wiped out. It's gone. If not for DNA testing that we have in our society now, because the technology, if it's correct, we wouldn't even know what regions we resided from, what long stranded traditions we had, what history we had. And history teaches us our mistakes, but it also teaches us a sense of value because 90% of the time, wherever we came from, there was a historical person or leader that you could be proud of, that you could hold your head up high to. So we're going to talk about that topic, and the realization I had about that topic was I think that's one of the reasons why African Americans in the United States kind of like cling to every other group and say we're all together. Whereas though if I'm one of those other groups, if I'm from like Reuben, Haiti, I can't pronounce the name of that great general, but he's one of the greatest generals in the history of the world. I mean, he fought for the Spanish, he fought for the French, he fought against the French and the Spanish, and he was a great general. And that's a legacy that if I was Haitian, that I wouldn't abandon and say, "Oh no, I'm just melanated in this group," or
Toussaint Louverture.
there you go. You know exactly who I was talking about within a second, and it identifies your history. It's somebody that you can be proud of. It's somebody that when you sit down there and say your diversity, you say I'm diverse because of my history. Our lack of knowledge in our history kind of contributes to us trying to put everybody together, but everybody doesn't want to be together within that. So let's talk about that topic. And that's my point of view on that in the beginning. So either one of you guys, give me your point of view.
Oh,
Oh, I'm
okay.
gonna start calling names. Huh?
Uh,
Okay, Aaron, give us your
I'll
point of
go.
view.
So, this topic could go a lot of different ways for me, but at the end of the day, if you have melanin in your body, then you're a melanated person. I don't know, like I know when I was in college, like a lot of Africans, people from Africa, Nigerians, and things of that nature, they didn't like to be called African American because they weren't African American. They actually didn't. Some of the ones that I've spoken to, the females didn't really like Americans. Like their family, their lineage didn't like American men. They only wanted them to be with their own kind or whatever, however you want to say it. But at the end of the day, we're all melanated. Like we have melanin in our skin. Like we're melanated people. So that's what I get from the term of melanated. Like we're melanated. We're different, yeah. But at the end of the day, we all have melanin in our skin, whether it
So,
be African American, whether it be African or Haitian or Jamaican, even Hispanics, they have melanin in their skin. Like I don't understand. Like what's the issue with being grouped? I mean, I understand the issue with being grouped together because everybody wants to be individuals. Everybody wants to have their own stamp in history or their own stamp in life. But at the end of the day, if you have melanin in your skin, then you're a melanated person. Like you can't
Okay,
dispute that.
I'm laughing for two reasons. The first reason, you see it, well, the African women, they don't want their parents don't want them to be with an American man. So they wasn't giving you the time of day because you was a Yankee.
No,
You know what I mean? Like you're
so
a Yankee, I'm not
that was
giving
the
you the
thing.
time of day.
So that was the thing in college. It's like, all right, we can have fun, we could do whatever, we can hang out, we could be friends, we can
But I
even
can't marry you.
yeah, we can even be boyfriend. But at the end of the day, you're not coming home to meet my parents. Like we're not leaving this campus knowing each other outside. Like, we're not going to my house. Like it wasn't
I'm
going.
just here to sow my royal oats. They're
Yeah,
just here to sow their royal oats.
that's basically what it was. It was like you know we could have fun, but you're not ever going to be my husband, and that's how it was.
Okay,
Even though
well,
we both were melanated.
okay. Let's go to Ruben before I start. I'm gonna start my
so
mess in a minute. I was just picking with
so
you. So
so
what do you
so
think
I,
about it, Ruben?
so I'm looking at the definition for Webster from Merriam-Webster, right? For melanin, and it reads, hold on, uh, any various black, dark brown, reddish brown, or yellow pigments of an animal or plant structure, such as skin or hair. So it's almost like when they talk about melanin, there's no mentions of even humans in here. It says of animal or plant structure.
Oh well,
Um,
that's because they probably cleaned it up. If you go to
I
the
mean,
definition as it was in 1940 or 1950 or 1848, I suspect it would be considered a little bit different. So,
and even the history and the etymology for the word melanin, it comes from the Greek melan, which stems from melas, which means black or dark. Um, After the Italian melana or melano. So now, with all these different terms, I don't really see people behind that, and I mean, especially with the first definition. So, which I'm gonna come up with my own conclusion and saying that that's probably why whenever with a lot of the race things that we got going on in our society, when you think of melanated people, you think of them as animals because even in Webster's dictionary, you know, the word melanin, I see it's associated with pigments of animal or plants, not humans, not us, not people,
and
not
as
living,
I said,
breathing.
But so
I,
plants do have melanin in them, but it's a different type of melanin. It's a variant different. It's different types of melanin that plants have that humans have, but we take on a brown skin color because we also have iron in our blood. And I forgot what metal plants have that makes it green. So if we had that metal, then we would be. If we had that metal in our body, then we would be green. And if they had iron in their structure, then they would be brown like us. But that's the reason why they both have melanin in it. But that's the reason why plants are green and we are so many different shades of brown.
I mean, plants are brown and green. I've never seen, the trunks are typically brown. Like that, the roots that come from out of the ground, that's brown. The leaves are green, but
sometimes they're
you
brown when they start to die.
Yeah, when they start.
yeah. So
They live a while before they die.
I
It's just the
all
process.
road
It's
lead
just
to
their
brown.
process.
So at the end of the day, I can understand that everybody doesn't want to be grouped together as melanated people because again, people like to
I
uh,
mean, right now, if you group together melanated people, there's no people in this list on this Webster's definition. This is plants or animals. Which one you want to be? You
well,
a
I
plant
mean,
or you an
Well, now
animal?
see, now hold it. We can't just go by the Webster
So
dictionary.
Since 1828.
So
But again, whether I want to go with it or not, you know, that's what the world is. That's what the world goes by. It's almost like we got certain standard, you know, that's been in place over the last 2,000 years or so. And you know, standard just meaning basically like that's what you know a group of people decided this is what we're gonna go by. And since 1828, you know, Merriam-Webster, that's the standard.
so if you're looking at
And here in this country,
ask Google,
remember that's this
which
country.
group of humans don't have melanin. If you're going to be asking Webster, ask Google what groups of humans don't have melanin in their skin.
All right. Well, when I went to Google first, it took me to Webster, so I can go to Google and ask Google. But you know, Google is basically just a source, and a resource. It takes me to the source which is Webster, which is like, you know, they've been around longer than Google. Google's new. Google's only about 20 years old. If that, maybe
Yeah,
30.
but they just relating information from other sources than the Google. But let's not totally go off topic. Um, Personally, I feel like if I have a rich history, I may not want to be associated with everything that happened to African Americans. You know what I mean? Like I use Haiti as an example. A lot of these rebellions and these wars that they fought for freedom was long before we had the Civil War and the Emancipation Proclamation, where slaves were supposedly free. So if I'm them, I'm like, listen, we fought the Spanish, and the Spanish was just slave traders, and we fought them. We made them leave, and then we had to deal with the French, and then we had to deal with the Spanish and the British again. So if I'm them, I have such a rich and diverse history. I mean, you can say I'm an African. You can say I'm an American,
I don't say I'm
and then you
African
can say
American.
you say you speak.
But
But now I'm glad you
I,
said that.
I don't say I'm African American because and for
Because hold
years
it,
you know.
let me finish. Let me
Go
finish,
ahead.
and then you can correct me. Because I was trying to correct myself. I was getting ready to say Haitian American, but I was going to be I was going to take a step back on that one too. Because really, when people come from other countries with diverse histories that they're proud of, they don't say African American. Like no other country really has one group and say like African French and this thing. You don't have all that. We're the only country that say African Americans because the only thing they can say about our lineage is we know you black and you came from Africa. We don't know where they got snatched you from because everybody went across the boundaries that they were supposed to use during that time. But we don't know where you got snatched from, but we just know you from Africa. You know what I mean? As if it's just one area, one place. Now, Ruben, go ahead and tell me what you can raise that.
So, but to piggyback on what you were saying, every black person not necessarily from Africa though, because you know Africa is where you know a lot of black people were, but you know Australia got black people. Their natives over there are black. You know, a lot of other continents, you know, their natives are black folks. It don't all got to come from Africa. And even with the slaves, they didn't all necessarily have to come from Africa. But back to what we were talking about as far as you know me, I don't consider myself African American at all because I'm not African. I'm Haitian. Now, granted, you know, maybe 300 years ago, there might have been some Africans that got on that boat. Well, they didn't get on the boat. They got forced on the boat and, you know, made their way to the island of Haiti, you know, that Christopher Columbus had done as Hispaniola, the New Spain or whatever. But with my heritage and my background and my history, as you mentioned, I'm proud to be Haitian. I have no remorse, and I was proud to be Haitian before it became cool to be Haitian. Because now, especially with you know hip hop culture and everything, it's like you hear people becoming more okay with referencing you know Haiti and referencing the Zoes and referencing you know the pride of that Caribbean nation, even though it still get a lot of backlash when we talk about you know a third world country and it's a foreign. it's a poor country, and it got a lot of adversities that go on over there. I'm still proud nonetheless, and I still rep it and claim it nonetheless, because I realize the older I get, how much not having that direct connection to slavery, you know, changes just your genetic makeup, changes your mindset, changes a lot about you. Because when we talk about slavery in America, the 50s wasn't that long ago. The 60s wasn't that long ago. Hell, the house that I live in was built in 1960, which means that where I live at today and the year that it was built, I wouldn't even dare to be caught dead in that neighborhood. When we talk about the history of the United States, whereas Haiti, slavery existed there for such a small period of time. It's not even really part of our history. Like, it's part of our history because we had a revolution, and we basically freed ourselves. But because it's so literally, like, the first generation of people that were there as slaves decided, like, yo, nah, this ain't gonna work. This ain't it. You know what? Maybe not the first generation, because the boat got there in 1400, in the 1800. That's when the slavery revolution happened. But that's still some 400 years ago.
I thought it was before the 1800s. I did a little research. Not that, because your history is better than me, but I thought they
No,
had slave revolts going on since the like 1600s. Big slave revolts.
no.
Like
So
little mini wars going on.
they have been fighting. They have been fighting to get rid of slaves for a while, for several years, because they wasn't. 1804 is when they finally got rid of everybody. But they had been fighting the slave masters from the minute they stepped foot on land over there, because who wants to be a slave? I mean, if especially when you're used to freedom, and you know what that feels like, when you know what it is to be your own man, you know what it is to do as you please when you please. Who wants to be put in chains and be told what to do?
True. I have another question for you. Because you said you don't uh, identify yourself as African American because you're Haitian. Like, it's just totally different. To you, it's like it shouldn't even be a question. But do you identify yourself as being part Taino? Because that whole Caribbean area, Haiti, Dominican Republic, I guess it was Santo Domingo back then, Puerto Rico. A lot of Taino DNA is mixed in there. Do you consider yourself Haitian, or do you consider yourself? If I said to you like, "Yo, you part Taino," how would you feel about that?
I mean, I wouldn't feel anyway. See, that's the thing is, until I do some type of ancestry.com, and I don't even think that would work for me, because like I don't believe those things are necessarily accurate when it comes to people that look like me, because where how can we truly verify where a bunch of people, where everybody's coming from, when you don't keep proper records of everyone. Now, if they still got all those slave records, and they still got all those birth certificates and deeds of sale, not birth certificate, but deeds of sales and everything like that, maybe they might be able to figure out, okay, based on this deed of sale, this boat was coming from this area, so this person could be from here. But unless they got everybody's bones and DNAs, I don't know. I don't trust those ancestry ones. But that's neither here nor there. I could very well be, a native, aside from the fact that I'm from Haiti, but like native of some of the original people that were already in Haiti. Because a lot of the native Haitians that weren't necessarily of African descent, they still live in that country too. Like, when you think of Haitians, we don't have a specific look. Like, it's gotten to the point where it's like, the story is, that's been portrayed is, if the person looks, somewhat disheveled and looks bad, or like, you got white people that were Haitians, because Haiti, went after they gained its freedom, it basically was America before America. Like you touch soil on Haiti, you touch foot on Haitian soil. No other country is allowed to come and claim you or touch you. They had the army, they had the navy, they had the trained officers. Like they had the money, you know. So could I very well be, you know, a descendant of somebody that was actually born in Haiti? Like, I mean, outside of obviously my father and my grandfather and the fathers before him, but you know, the natives of the land, that's possible. That's possible because a lot of those people were still there when Haiti became free. Like it wasn't, it hadn't gotten to the point where like everyone that lived on that land was eradicated, like, you know, most of the United States was.
Well, I mean, you're speaking on the to your point. You're speaking on like the Native Americans. They weren't eradicated. A lot of people don't realize, like, even when they say melanated people, they don't realize that there was a chapter in Native American history before all these agreements and contracts wasn't honored. That the U.S. are the ruling class of the founding members of the U.S. government. They felt as though that they could take the Native Americans and make them, they'd be willing to join their lifestyle, like to follow the stuff that they do. And they did. They became like uh, farm owners, sharecroppers. They were even slave masters. Like people act like they don't know that. Like they were. They owned slaves too. Like this was a part of what was going on in the world. Not that most cultures had slaves in some form at some time. So that's not totally like crazy. But I mean, they were slave owners too. So when you sit down there and you say something to a certain group, and then you're like, you're all in this, you're all melanated. Like, no, we're all not in the same group. Some groups have different histories. And like Ruben said, you don't even want to hear that African American stuff because he's Haitian. You know what I mean? Which leads me to my next point, and this will be for Aaron because Aaron's been quiet for a while. And, you know, a lot of times we African Americans feel like people that come from other places that are melanated or look like they may be African descent feel like they better than us. Um, but is it wrong because you have a rich history that you know about to feel like, yo, I'm better than the stuff that was going on in this country because what was going on in my country, we was past that at that time, and we were past a certain part of it. So when you talk about this stuff in this form, it kind of brings it into focus. Like, how can somebody just be feeling like, yo, you know, I'm better than that? And you said it yourself in a way when you was like, don't bring. You said those girls was like, don't bring home no dude unless he African, like, because they feel like you be better off with an African instead of over here. Now, there's another portion that we want to touch on, but I'm gonna stop right there. So, what do you think about that, Aaron?
I mean, at the end of the day, when we talking about melanated people, so like you keep putting a label on it as an African American or Haitian or just African. At the end of the day, when I talk about melanated people, is if you are melanated, if you have melanin in your skin, like stripping it all the way down to the bottom line. If you black, if you have darker skin, you have melanin in your skin. You're a melanated person. So whether you agree with it or not, like it's nothing to really agree with. Like you have melanin in your skin, you can't argue with that. So like, but if people are trying to group you in with African Americans, then okay, you can dispute that if you're not African American, if you don't identify as that. So like if you filling out an application and you know it has, are you white, African American, or Hispanic, and you don't identify with any of those, then you won't mark any of that off. But if on the application that says are you melanated and you're melanated, you can't not identify with that because you're melanated. Is just point blank period. Like you can't argue with that. If you have melanin in your skin, you're a melanated person. So like
No,
um if you break it down to that, like I can't say, I mean, again, the Africans, even the African males that I knew in college, they're very prideful, and that's fine. Like you can have pride for who you are and where you came from. There's nothing wrong with that. And if you don't want to identify with African Americans because you didn't grow up in America, you happen to come to America, for its resources or for a better living or whatever it may be, a better education, then that's fine. You don't have to identify with African Americans because you're not African American. You're African, or you're Haitian, or you're Jamaican, or you're Hispanic. You don't have to. You're Puerto Rican. You don't have to say you're African American or Jamaican American or however they want to put it, if that's not how you identify. But if you go up to an African person who is clearly melanated and you ask them, are they a melanated person? And they say no, it is hard. Like, how do you dispute that? Like, how do you, unless they don't understand what melanin is, then I don't understand how you can dispute that. Like, we are all grouped together as melanated people at the end of the day if you have melanin in your in your DNA. But
Now,
to break it down to African Americans, I can see why they may want to make that distinction as to who or what they feel like that they are.
now you just brought up a good point, and when you were talking, I just realized this while you were talking when you were naming the groups, and I think part of the reason that African Americans use melanated in a different way, well, not in a different way, because you brought up a good point about the actual definition of the world word. Do you have melanin in your skin? But African Americans group everybody together. Like I said in the beginning, I think it's because our history is a little bit disheveled, a little bit lost, so we're not as prideful as we would be if our accomplishments, because our accomplishments in our history is so recent. When I say recent, I mean like 300 years, or maybe 150 years of the stuff that was actually recorded. And then in this country, yes, we get Black History Month, but do they tell the whole story? Like, if you're African American, then you're a big part of American history, and then our history should be combined and told to everybody, so we don't repeat those mistakes, so we build together. But because information is like, don't say this, don't say that, this might be a problem, do this, we don't want to look bad by saying that, that leads to us wanting to include other people in there. But the point when you were naming the other groups, the only group that's something an American that has a with that connotation, that has a singular need for it, is African American. We'll say we're African American. We're African American. Puerto Ricans don't say Puerto Rican American. Chinese don't say they Chinese American. Jamaicans don't say they Jamaican American. We make it a point to include ourselves as American
Do we?
because of
Do we
our
make the
history.
point, or has that been bred in us to say that? To
Well,
identify that?
we saying it now, so we making a point now. Maybe it was bred into us, maybe that idea was put into us, but we have more freedoms and liberties where we can sit down there and say, hey, like you the one that said, if you fill out an application, you cannot fill in your race and that. Like we didn't have that liability or that ability before, and then we weren't. I got to go in the history books and check, but we probably wasn't considered African American until the 70s, maybe the late 60s. It probably was, we were just blacks, the colors. We wasn't considered American. They didn't put that connotation on us because of what was going on in the race scenario during that time. That would empower us to make us feel like we're a part of something. And that's not what was going on. They were, society was trying to like dehumanize certain elements.
So like
So
we
We were Negroes.
we don't have
Yous was Negroes.
we don't have anything to identify with, to be blunt about it, because Ruben can identify he's Haitian. So he came from Haiti. So that's what he identifies with. Me and you grew up in America. He said that he didn't do his ancestry. I did mine, and I'm 23% European, and I'm like almost 50%
You
Nigerian.
know,
So it's like, what do I identify with? I have to
I,
say, I can't say that I'm mixed. I'm mixed.
see you being European.
Huh?
I can see that. I can see the European now that you mentioned
Yeah,
it's
like,
all in the beard.
but,
it.
but what I'm saying is we don't have anything to identify with. So we have
And
to.
I'm agreeing with you.
We
That's
don't
the
we don't
same thing I'm saying.
identify with African American, but we do because it's like what else? What else can we say?
Once upon a time, you would have identified as Italian because they used to be the Negroes of Europe. So anytime somebody was melanated and it was like they had this mix going on, you would have been you would have fell in the Italian bucket.
Right.
Well, not even
Because
just that. They considered Irish when they started the race connotations on a lot of things. They used the Irish. It was the British Empire that started it. They used the Irish to say it. Like they were savages, they were slaves. You know, they're different than us. So yeah, Italian, Irish. When they came here, they were treated the same way.
right,
So when you sit down there and say that certain groups is always going to strip another group for their benefit. The problem is these are the after effects when you try to fix something. When you fix something and you created this problem, how can we fix this problem? Like,
I don't
how
think
can
this
we make
problem can
people
be
feel?
fixed.
It can't because like right now
Somebody got to be at the bottom. Somebody got to be at the bottom. Like the reality of it is, if everything that we have in this world, there should be no famine. We don't lack anything in the world that we live in, but yet we do lack it. You got countries that lack. You got this trick that's happened where the people that have a lot have tricked the people that don't have a lot, that don't have as much, into believing that the people that have a lot, what they have is more valuable than the people that quote unquote don't have as much. Now, what I mean by that, when somebody is rich, a lot of the times, all they're looking to do is go live on an island and chill by the beach, walking around with their feet in the sand, wearing close to nothing. Most poor people that live in those, islands get to do that without having any of the money and the finances of the quote unquote rich people. So you got people that living in third world countries that get to have access to nice beaches and chill and relax and live off the fat of the land. And then you got them believing, you know, that they're not rich because, well, you don't have a Rolls Royce, or you don't have a really big mansion, or you don't have, whatever fine jewelry or whatever. Whereas the people with the fine jewelry and all those things, all they're looking for they're looking for the simple things in life. It's this trickery that's kept the world basically with this never-ending cycle of you working hard, you do this, you do that, you following all these rules and steps and regulations that who knows who put them all together, but that's just the game everybody's playing. Like the person that has it
Go
is
ahead. I'm
tricking the
sorry.
person that the person that has it is tricking the person that doesn't have it into believing that the person that quote unquote doesn't have it wants what the person that have it has, when all in all the person with the least is really the happiest because they're at peace, they have simplicity. Now that being said, I'm looking to gain the monetary things just so I can get the peace because that's just what the game is.
But now, is it really? I guess it is some trickery, some manipulation. Um, and somebody will correct me if I'm wrong because we've been getting comments and they like to correct us when we're wrong. Right? I'm becoming a target out here, but I think it was the Canterbury Tales by William Johnson, and he was the first one that went into the fact that people are never really satisfied with what they get. Like you can have everything that you think you want, and then you can tell yourself that you need more. Like you see somebody with a better car, a better home, a better this, and we're never satisfied. It's a portion of human nature. We always want more than we actually need, and because we always want more than we actually need, I think a lot of times it can be manipulated. And I think Ruben, you are right when you say that's the game. Sometimes simplicity in life is really all you need. Stress free, enough to feed your belly, enough to feed your kid, shelter. But we have this disposition where we need more. Like it's never enough. It's always something more that we have to gather or something we have to gain. And I think sometimes that goes just not over like finance, just like relationships. We could do a whole show over that, but not to deviate off that topic. Let's get to the end of the show. I'm kind of curious to hear your answers. The last couple shows, I said, let me know your thoughts, and we won't do who's to blame. And a lot of you two guys were shaking your head like, oh no, we blame somebody. This is what we're going to do. So we're going to go back to the original format. Who do we blame for this problem, and how can we fix the problem? Because we're talking about a problem, but I think a lot of times when people hear us do our dialogue about the topic, about the problem, you can't fix a problem unless you sit down there and you strip that problem down to the bare basics of what it is, because you got to get to the truth and you got to go from there. So we also stress that we want a solution to the problem. So you strip it down and then you come with your solutions. Everybody's solution ain't gonna be the same. Everybody's solution is not gonna be right. But even in your failures, to find something that could lead in the right direction, you learn more. You learn more by failing than you learn from like getting the damn thing right altogether all the time. If you're always right, you never really learn that. You're just always right. When you fail, you learn a couple of things. You learn how to get to the decision you should have made, and you learn a couple other things that lead to that path that you might be able to solve too. So we're going to get to this other portion of the show. Who's to blame? We're going to let Aaron start. Who do you blame for this situation? As
Uh,
far as like thinking you're not under the umbrella, and how can you solve this situation?
I blame uneducated people. I think that we all need to educate ourselves on. I I'm not too big on history because looking up history, people write history, people rewrite history, so you don't know what history is facts and what's fiction. You don't know who's writing what. But at the end of the day, like I said, if you're melanated, if you have melanin in your skin, then you're a melanated person. If you don't know who or what to identify with, that's a fact that you can't deny. Like you're a melanated person. You don't have to say, I'm Jamaican or African or American. You don't have to say all of that. You can just say, I'm a melanated person, and you can go into details about that because it's science that backs that you could look that up. And sometimes science is a little sketchy too. But I blame people who are uneducated on certain topics and want to group everybody in a central category or box them in. And people don't like to be boxed in or put in a box for that matter. So if you educate yourself on who you are and what you perceive yourself as, then it doesn't matter what anybody else sees you as long as you know who you identify as and who you are on the inside. Uh,
Okay,
we fix
so
that problem
I'm
by educating ourselves.
okay. So since you went in there and said educate yourself from the beginning, you mean me too. Sticking on that definition. So, Ruben, what's your response after the Italian?
So who do I blame? I blame I blame the people in power, man. And what do I mean by that? If right now it's banking, the people who run the different currencies, in our civilization and our society, because at the end of the day, they've managed to come up with a system where four, five, six families are controlling the whole world as far as currencies and everything. And essentially, what that does is they dictate what goes where. They dictate price. They dictate everything. Nothing, but everything that's on this earth is ours. No one person or entity can own it. One of the biggest tricks that the American government has managed to do was basically having people believe that they own anything in this country. You don't own anything. You rent forever. Yes, if you play the game the right way, you can somewhat have a benefit to you. But overall, even after you pay your mortgage, you're still paying taxes on it. I don't care what you call it. That's rent. So, because of that, I blame the banking system. I blame the people in charge of the money. the people in charge of the banks, the people in charge of the finances, because at the end of the day, that's what's dictating, the moves that you make. People that don't have as much, people that are struggling, when you're operating from less, you essentially tend to be willing to do whatever more than somebody who's already operating from a positive. But when you're struggling, when you're hungry, when your stomach is growling, when you're lacking in the basics, there's a higher chance of you bringing out the animalistic instinct from inside of you, just because you're trying to survive. And because of that, you don't necessarily see the best of people when you operating from the negative, when you're operating from a sense of your survival. So I blame the finances, I blame the banks. Back to you, Mel.
Okay. I'm not going to blame anybody in this situation. And I'm not going to blame anybody in this situation, not because people are blameless. People are blameless. Um, we all know the history of this country, whether it's in detail or not. So I'm not going to blame everybody for that. And I'm not going to blame any prideful people because I have no problem with people having pride from where they sprang from, their lineage, their history. You should be proudful when you hear things. You know what I mean? You should be proudful whether it goes back 500 years or it goes back 50 years. You hear something your grandfather did or your grandmother did. You know what I mean? It should be some pride that you carry within you. People say pride is a bad thing, but they always say too much pride is a bad thing. Some pride is always a good thing. I technically don't really like the term African American. I never did. I never understood the term because whether your ancestor was on one side of the whip or the other side of the whip, we built this nation together. We should be reaping the rewards in this nation together. Um, that same person that was back there is not here now. You're here. You're an American citizen. You should be proud of what you built. You helped build a nation. The rest of the world was established, and you came and you built a nation, and that nation is now a superpower. That nation is the leader in the world. That nation everybody looks to for support and try to follow their whole path. Now, is that path always correct? No. But is that path always wrong? No. It's like everything else. We're not a utopia. We have our flaws. We learn from our mistakes. We'll get better over time. And that's the main goal of any society. As time goes on, you get better. You erase some negative shit and you move forward. Always moving forward, always learning more, always become more understanding of what's going on in the world. Does that get slowed down by selfishness? Yes. You brought up the bankers movement. Does money and finances come into that? Yes. It always has. But are we trying to move in the right path? Do we have enough people trying to look to go in the right path? Yes. So the solution to our problem is the people. And the people saying to themselves, yes, this happened. Yes. Um, the congressman that passed away, and I can't think of his name, John Lewis, he said, you always have to do good work. You always have to press harder. Good work. Like you always have to take these things that are negative and deal with them and make them a positive. Does that mean you have to burn everything down? No. But you always move forward. You always try to get better. And we as a nation need to stop saying Chinese American, which you rarely hear. You'll never hear a Chinese person say that. But African American, that connotation, that shit needs to go in the toilet, flush down, no tissue, go straight to the sewer because we are all Americans. And that's my solution to the problem. Acknowledge who we are. We built this country in many forms, and we're a part of this country. And we're going to all move forward together in this country, no matter what we are, because we're all Americans. So I want to thank everybody for joining us for Combustible Elements. Remember, I had a malfunction. Did you see that? I had a malfunction.
Yeah.
So I I want to thank everybody for joining us for Combustible Elements. Make sure you like the video, share it if you can, subscribe, please. We're still trying to grow. Leave your comments. We've been answering comments. We're leaving them so everybody can see them. Leave your comments, your questions. If you disagree, you don't disagree, you got something to say. Come on and let's talk about it. Everything don't have to be a fight. Everything is a point of view. Point of views, when you add them together, you mix them in a pot, you get an explosion, we start to understand different points of view. And we can only get better from that. So I want to thank my co-host, Ruben, the Haitian monarch, Aaron, the Italian hitman, and Mr. America, Melvin Moore. And we look forward to you joining us again for Combustible Elements. Thanks, everybody. Peace out.
Yeah. Peace.